Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to connect you with two members from the House of Delegates today. Delegate Barry Knight, good to see you.
Good to see you, Woody.
Delegate Glenn Davis, you're looking good as usual.
Oh, thank you. I try and appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Appropriations, busy year, new issues. Got a lot of money according to the governor. What do you think about that?
Well, I think we do have a lot of money according to the governor, but we've got the rainy day fund, we've got a fund, we've got VRS, we've got a fund, but also we've got about $1.2 billion that the governor thinks that he wants to give away, so to speak, and I think he's probably right. We ought to give it back to the people that paid this. So that's where we're having a philosophical difference is the people that paid it in, we have a windfall, let's give it back to them. And he says, let's spend it on a whole lot of programs and a whole lot of freebies. And he's going to try to be Santa Claus this year, and we're going to try to rein in Santa Claus.
So it'll come down to the bitter end, I assume, this year, and you're one of the budget conferees, aren't you?
I am, and I hope it doesn't come down to the bitter end. We need tax conformity right now, so we need to get a bill that the House and Senate will agree to, and I believe we will, but we need the governor to sign it so people can start filing their tax returns and getting these deductions.
So that's going to be important to your constituents as well, this tax conformity in terms of at least the standard deduction, for example.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Barry's 100% right. And we have a governor that he says that we want to give more money back to those that need it the most, but what he doesn't want to be truly clear about is he wants to give more money back to people than what they paid in income taxes to begin with. Barry's thought, and others on appropriations on our side, is let's let everyone get the money back that they paid in. Don't take some from a group of middle-class Virginians and give it to people that never paid that much to begin with. And that's where the governor's not exactly being truthful and clear.
So the filing deadline in Virginia is what, May 15th, I think, something like that?
Yes, sir. For business and, of course, personal is April 15th.
Right, exactly. Well, hopefully that will be taken care of. Now, I want to cover some of the bills that you have introduced. There's one dealing with cannabis oil. Talk to us about that.
Sure. Well, Woody, last year, Virginia allowed Virginians to have an affirmative defense for medical CBD oil for a host of major diseases, life-threatening diseases, and other things that the doctors so felt it would be beneficial for. But we only allowed 5 licenses for the production of that around the Commonwealth. And unfortunately, those that need it the most, those the aged, the severely disabled, are least likely to be able to get to one of those 5 locations, probably hours from their house, to be able to get the product that their doctor says would be most beneficial to them. So by doubling the licenses, it allows for more production. We have distribution centers that they can actually go to pick it up as opposed to have to drive 3-4 hours away. So it actually provides what the intent of the law was last year, which is to allow all Virginians access to this medicine.
Now, this medicine has THC, does it not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And of course, there was a lot of controversy about allowing the use of it.
Well, there was, and a lot of education. So other states have realized, and studies have shown that CBD oil can actually replace opioids. And this time of the opioid epidemic that we're seeing around the nation, anytime you can put someone on a different drug that doesn't have the same addiction properties, that isn't as dangerous, you should. And what they're seeing is not only is it less addictive and harmful than opioids, but it also is more impactful and has a larger positive impact in many cases than an opioid would. So that's why we're so thrilled to be able to have Virginians access to that and why we want to expand it this year.
And Delegate Knight, public safety issues you've been involved in, especially as it relates to aviation. Talk to us about legislation you have around drones.
Well, Our largest economic driver probably in Hampton Roads, of course, is our military. And Oceana Airfield, which is totally encompassed in my district, came to the city of Virginia Beach, and of course they came to me. So in cooperation with all of those folks and everyone down in Hampton Roads is trying to save the military, they said we may have a problem with encroachment of drones over military airspace. So they said, would you put in a bill? So I put in a bill. Come to find out, we don't have any control over the airspace, which I'm certainly aware of that being a pilot. So we're putting in a bill to limit activity around lifting and taking off from state lands or any land that is in the city of Virginia Beach, isn't under federal control, because they have control of that, to limit the use of drones there, because the worst thing we could ever see is a jet fighter pilot running into a drone.
What about sports entertainment in your district, the Hampton Roads area?
Oh, that's a good one. We had something called a sports arena, which was going to come a few years ago, and I put in legislation for that, and the sports arena did not come. So now down at what we call the old Virginia Beach Dome site, which is about 10 acres, we've got where the city would like to partner up with a private developer and this entertainer called Pharrell Williams and some others to put in a recording studio, a large wave machine, and a lot of amenities, but it's $330 million. So what my legislation is going to say is if Virginia Beach okays it, and if Virginia Beach wants to put in infrastructure and do everything, then the unrealized state tax dollars, retail and sales tax, when you sell popcorn, when you have the admissions tax, some of that state tax that would come back to the state, there's 1.5% that has to come back, okay? The rest of it, we're gonna rebate to the city of Virginia Beach for bond repayment to help accelerate payment down to make their term sheet where this can be a doable situation. So if we do that, then the state automatically gets between $750,000 to $1 million that they're not getting now. This site has not been utilized since 1994. It's vacant ground, just used to park cars on. So if we can make this happen, then the state will get this $750,000 to $1 million, plus the state tax dollars of all the economic benefit for the extra hotel room stays, restaurants, etc. So it looks like a win-win situation because everyone's going to get something that they don't have now.
Your new media and technology tax credit. Talk to us about that.
Sure. So a number of states have tax policies where if someone comes and films in the state, movies or other things, that they get tax credits, basically money given to them. I want to change this in Virginia, working with, and this is a Pharrell Williams project, to help bring more large-scale series work. So think The Walking Dead, those very impactful type economic opportunities and tourism type opportunities to Virginia in large scale. Netflix, Amazon, Apple, all these companies need to produce significantly more content than they have in the past, their own organic content. They want to do it in Virginia, but they want a way to be competitive here. And this creates a new program that they can apply in bulk for 10 years worth of work to the Commonwealth through what we call the MEI Commission, and if approved, that amount of work will create the need for infrastructure around this industry, additional workforce around the industry, and let us, Virginia, be known for that new media. The media and film is seeing a technological resurgence that we haven't seen, I would argue, since the invention of the television set. Since then, we went from what, black and white to color, maybe high def to 4K, not that big of a deal. But what we're seeing now is a transition from what we see today with our TV, but augmented reality, virtual reality. There's more and more of that going on. If you look at the new video games being produced today, Red Dead Redemption 2 has 70 hours of film in it. That's not even the playing period of the game. All that stuff is this high-tech film and video content that can be organically done here in Virginia and create a whole new industry for the Commonwealth.
And I see you're also interested in state agencies transitioning to the cloud.
Yes, sir. This is something that impacted Barry and I last year. We were under threat of that hurricane last year, and when the hurricane was coming down and barreling down our way, the state and the locality said, go to the state websites to know your flood zone so you know whether you have to evacuate. And of course, the governor issued an evacuation for one zone. The problem is that caused our servers to crash. And people couldn't find this. So what I did is I called Secretary Moran and said, please send me the PDFs. I put them on my business Google Drive. and sent out emails saying, if you need to see this stuff, come to my site, and mine didn't crash. And it's because it was on a cloud-based service that, not to get into the weeds, is dynamic. The more people come, the more bandwidth that can be dynamically allocated, the more processing speed that can be allocated to handle all the visitors to a site. Virginia needs to get away from the 1990s thought of we need to own our servers, we need to handle our servers, because that type of mentality is what causes an infrastructure to not be dynamic and to have the problems that we had last year. So this would bring us into the 21st century and make sure that we have this mission-critical services when it's so needed by our citizens.
Speaking of computer crashes, though, is the Virginia Beach area still subject to a lot of adverse weather and therefore a lot of other problems?
Well, we certainly are subject to some adverse weather with hurricanes coming up the coast, and we've got some flooding concerns there too. And I've got a study in for this year to look at flooding that's specific to my district, which is southern Virginia Beach, where we get southern winds that blow up from the Pamlico Sound, Currituck Sound, and cause some flooding. So I'm asking for the State Secretary of Natural Resources in coordination with maybe some of the federal government, and I've got some solutions, but they're going to be very, very expensive. But we've just got to run the cost analysis and see if the solutions are cheaper than the damage that can be done. So yeah, we do have some adverse weather conditions.
What about just rising sea levels in the Virginia Beach area overall?
Well, we've certainly got those, and we've got some flood issues there. It's more critical over in Norfolk on the rising sea over there around the Navy base area and such, but in Virginia Beach we have two dynamics with the southern winds and the rising tide, and we're certainly looking at that, and that's going to be a big, big fix. But we've put a chief resiliency officer in the cabinet with Governor Ralph Northam. So Virginia's getting very, very serious about this, and we're getting serious about it because it has a tremendous economic impact on the area, plus on the Navy, and we want to keep the Navy happy.
And of course, the Port of Virginia keeps pumping out revenue.
They do keep pumping out revenue. We know that we've got to diversify because the armed services are our biggest economic driver, but the port is state-owned, and we want to help the port. We gave them a $350 million bond package to revitalize some of their cranes and some of their equipment around there to make them competitive. And along with that, we're going to a 55-foot dredging that state is committed seed money to, and because we have, now the feds are stepping up and they say we're going to dredge to 55 feet our channels so we can get some of these Supermax ships in.
And Delegate Davis, I take it that port is critical to your constituency as well.
Oh, there's no doubt, and I would argue it's critical to everyone that lives in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I mean, you can imagine it being, within depending on traffic, a half-an-hour drive or so from, my district. Not just the number of employees that live in my district and surrounding areas, but the number of jobs it creates, the economic impact. But also the economic impact around the Commonwealth. I mean, when you start looking at that port, the inland ports, the trucking associated with the port, the businesses and the distribution centers that have come to Virginia and are looking at coming to Virginia, you start to realize the multiplier effect that port has on our economy. So I don't think it can be overstated how important that port is, not just to today's economy, but the growth of our economy in the future.
And of course, we're competing with other ports up and down the eastern seaboard, New York, Charleston, Savannah, I believe.
Oh, it's we got to be very careful. Virginia has done a lot to move this port forward and start to get, I think, recognized around the world again as one of the prime ports, in this part of the world. But we were like that again back in 2001 when no one was close to us. We rested on our laurels. Savannah started to grow. New York started to come around and look at raising their bridge. So although we've made significant strides because of Berrien appropriations and others, we can't rest on our laurels because everyone's still going to be trying to catch up, and we've got to make sure that this investment isn't the end. It's the beginning of a maintaining scenario that continues to grow the economy for decades to come.
Another investment initiative, so to speak, deals with casinos. I understand that's something that you have an interest in as well.
Well, I do. We've been hearing about wanting to put some casinos in Bristol, Danville, and maybe Portsmouth. But where we live, the Pamunkey Indians have gotten federal recognition through Congress, which gives them the opportunity to have gambling or gaming. And what that means is they can show any place where they hunted and fished, which would be basically east of the Blue Ridge Mountains, that they can prove that, and they can certainly prove it in our neck of the woods in Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, that they can have a gambling casino. So if they go and they buy land, they're a sovereign nation. And then they don't have to ask the state for anything. They can do this. But what they have offered is to say, we would like to enter into a compact with the state, so maybe y'all provide us some services that we pay for, and we'll go in there and we'll put a casino in. So what the dynamics are is this federal approval, if you will, could take as long as 6 or 7 years. We've got some legislation for the Bristol bill that if I do the same thing and do a parallel track, we can do it a little bit faster. So make no mistake, the Pamunkey Indians are coming. They're coming to Norfolk. They're going to have a casino. If we partner up with them through my bill, then we can have some controls, we can have some say-so, and they'll share in their revenues and their profits. And it'll be statewide, we'll get some of the profits, and locally we'll get some profits, which means Norfolk, but the surrounding communities will share some profits too, the way my legislation is drafted.
What kind of opposition is there, if any?
Well, you have a little bit of opposition from some people that don't believe that we ought to have gambling, but gambling is coming with the Pamunkey Indians. So we do have 1% of the adjusted gross profits go into problem gambling and addiction in my legislation to try to, stave that off, if we will.
Something good for the Commonwealth, you think, in your area?
Well, as Barry said, it's coming to Norfolk. There's nothing Virginia can do, even if we wanted to stop it, and that's the first thing that has to be kept in mind. So if that's the case, the question is, how do we maximize the opportunity for Virginians and also make sure that we address any other issues that may arise because of it? And I think that's why it's very unique with Barry's bill, because it kind of handles that delicate situation that exists today, both the negotiations with the Pamunkey Indians, which is a very delicate scenario that we can't have other stuff get ahead of or else we lose that opportunity. Provide opportunities for others around the Commonwealth and other areas that are in significant needs of economic drivers, and then make sure that the money is used in a way to truly help those around there, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's going to localities, or to go into those that may be in need today with certain addictions that there may be a concern of if we have gambling in certain areas. And I think Barry's bill handles all that. So if we do it right, I think we can do this in the best interest of Virginians.
Talk to us about your step therapy legislation.
Sure. Woody, this is probably my most important bill this year because of not just how many people it impacts, but because of what it means to people. Right now in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Woody, you or your loved one could be afflicted with a major disease, cancer, MS, and you go or your spouse goes to the doctor and he says, the best thing that you could do is this treatment with these medicines. And the insurance company has the right to say, no, we're not going to approve that treatment or those medicines. You have to take these other medicines and fill first for 6 months, a year before you can have what your doctor prescribes. And as much as maybe you and I would want to say, we need to get rid of this because I trust my doctor, the stakeholders aren't asking for that. All they're asking for, Woody, is transparency. They want to know that there's no conflict of interest on the people deciding what drugs the insurance company is trying to push, right? They want to make sure that those that are deciding to override their doctor are looking at the newest studies and the newest information on what the best treatments are and taking into account unique factors. We've been trying to push this for 4 years, Woody. I think this is the year we can finally get it through, and we should, because it really, in some cases, is life and death, and in all cases, it's quality of life for those that really do need some help.
Back to the opioid crisis for a moment. I understand that it's very difficult to stay ahead of these kinds of issues because people are starting to produce synthetic drugs now, like fentanyl. And it's a business. It's a big business, and as you clamp down on one, people are very creative in terms of chemistry. So how do we deal with those kinds of issues?
I think it's twofold, Woody. First and foremost, it's an education process. Not just with adults today, but with these kids in school today. They need to understand that this isn't just a cool thing, and this isn't, like your parents maybe having done marijuana when they were a kid. These are very dangerous drugs, and people are dying on these drugs. So we have to stop it with the degeneration we're at today and make sure everyone coming up understand that. Then we have to make sure that we work close with our public safety and make sure they're funded in a manner where they can go out there and they can address where some of these bigger issues arise, especially those that are supplying these drugs. And lastly, we need to make sure that we have those treatment facilities funded. So those that find themselves down on the luck, that find themselves on a path that they didn't intentionally want to be on, that they've got a way to get back on their feet and get off that addiction. I think those are the three things that we have to address to make sure that we can start walking off. But like you said, it's going to be a heavy lift and it's going to be a long road. But I think Virginia's well on a path, especially through some of the appropriation funds that we've put towards this over the last year to make sure that we continue down this road.
Delegate Knight, I understand the state has addressed the issue regarding people who shop for different doctors. They go to one doctor and he or she writes a prescription, they come back the next time and they say no, so they just go to another doctor. I understand there's a database that has been created to track those kinds of transactions to avoid that kind of circumstance now.
Well, I believe there probably has. Glenn probably knows more about that than I do. I do know that, as chairman of public safety in appropriations, we're appropriating a lot of money because a lot of these overdoses have to do with public safety within my, sector there, and more especially for prisons and stuff in there. So we've really got a problem. It looks like the problem is diminishing just a little bit, but it's very sad to say that part of the reason this problem is diminishing because a lot of these people have died. So our death rate is down, so we don't know if we're getting ahead of the opioid epidemic or it's just the people that were using it are dying off, because it's a terrible affliction everywhere in the state, but more especially in Southwest Virginia. So we're trying to help, but it's hard to get ahead of this. It really is.
There's another part of the Virginia economy that exists over on the Eastern Shore that I know you have a great deal of interest in. It has to do with the harvesting of a certain fish, menhaden. I know some people consider it a boring subject, but it can get very exciting sometimes.
Well, it is. A menhaden is a fish that is kind of at the bottom of the food chain. And the way that they capture these fish is they go with spotter planes. And you can look down and see them. It looks like a big ink spot in the water that's flashing. The spotter plane will give GPS coordinates to the menhaden boats. They'll send out a large, pretty big large boat or ship, if you will, take two smaller boats, wrap them with a net, put a big vacuum in there and suck them up. So I've been having legislation for the 11 years that I have been here to try to rein them in. For last year, for the first time ever in the last 40 or 50 years, or forever, I got it out of full committee. So I got it out of full committee, so I'm getting some traction. But they can take and get 80,000 metric tons out of the Chesapeake Bay. Last few years, they've been taking 33, 36, 39,000 metric tons because the bigger and better fish with the higher oil content are in the ocean. So I would like to get them out of the bay, which I consider our nursery. Voluntarily, Omega is coming out of the bay a little bit, which I'm happy as I can be. I'd like to put that in code, but they're resisting me. But I think that my legislation's having an effect because it's shining a spotlight on what I perceive to be a problem.
So what are these fish used for?
Well, these fish are used for animal feed. They're ground up for hog feed and some other fish feed. They're the protein source, if you will, because they're high in protein. So they extract some oil to put some omega-3s that you and I may take, but overwhelmingly the biggest majority is for animal protein, so they mix it in animal feed.
And right now, this industry is regulated by the members of the General Assembly.
That's right. It's the only thing that's in the water that isn't regulated by VMRC or the scientist. And I'm not real sure someone from Abington, Virginia knows what a menhaden is, much less that the menhaden is under their purview for regulations. All I want to do is go to a committee and say, if you think you know more than the scientist, continue to regulate it. If you think the scientists know more than you do, let's put it in the purview of the scientist.
We'll put that question to Delegate Davis. Does he think he knows more than the scientists about the regulation of menhaden fish?
Oh, I don't know more than Barry does about it. Mm-hmm. So when I first got elected, Barry and I have a very good mutual friend who came to me and said, Glenn, you know, when you get up there, I want you to be very careful on this Menhaden issue. And I'm like, okay, I can't spell Menhaden, but I will go Google it. And I've learned a lot from that friend and from Barry. I agree with Barry 100%. And I think that's an issue that, that is very important. And I honestly, I followed Barry's lead. I mean, Barry is known, you know, when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to our waterways, Barry is one of the foremost experts and resources in the General Assembly. And I think, like he's mentioned, he's made significant strides on, even though the legislation not passing through the General Assembly, having a significant impact on that industry just by what he's been pushing.
Any impact yet from the government shutdown in your district?
You know, Woody, I have a lot of government employees in my district. Obviously, you can imagine a large military area as well. And I think it's having an impact. I have not had people reaching out to me and giving me the stories. But I think anytime that you start impacting, income coming in on a consistent basis is gonna impact people's lives. As all of us do, I think we hope that it comes to a speedy end here sometime soon. But it has to be done so in a responsible manner up in Washington. I think all of us can agree that Washington's broken, has been broken for some time. I think they can learn a lot of lessons from us here in Richmond. But I look forward to Washington getting back to doing what the people elected them to do, but in a responsible manner.
Barry, you are a farmer by background training in business. How important is farming and forestry to the economy of the state of Virginia?
It's by far the largest economy in the state.
Say that again, because I don't think most people understand it.
By far the largest economy to the state, by far. Nothing's even close when you put agriculture and forestry together. And I've been a farmer all my life, and I know that it's supply and demand factor, so we have to be able to get some good prices. So that's where the port is so significant for exporting logs, exporting grain, and we've got a lot of programs. We value our farmers and our loggers in Virginia, so we've got a lot of programs to help them keep the state in clean water and clean food, and it's just an economic stimulus that folks don't really recognize, but it's there.
How are we doing education-wise, especially K through 12?
Woody, we're doing very well. We have some of the best schools in the nation, specifically in Barry and I's area and in Northern Virginia. However, there are some areas that are still hurting, especially in rural Virginia, both in access to resources, access to teachers. We do have a teacher shortage, and we have to address that. Your education's only going to be as strong as the teachers you've got there. And we are starting to produce some amazing teachers, and I think have for a long time. But we have to make sure that we can afford to keep our teachers, and we fund it so we can afford to keep the teachers when they have such an impact, not just on their students, but also mentoring their fellow new teachers coming in. Additionally, we've got to continue to ensure that our upcoming students have access to technology. And I'm not talking just iPads in the schools and laptops in the schools, which are very important, but Woody, in some areas, we have a hard time getting internet access to our schools. And in a day where the most of the most impactful learning opportunities and educational opportunities are online, we need to make sure all of our students have access to that. So there's a big push for broadband access, a big push for technology in the school, and a big push to make sure that we continue to fund teachers at a level that we don't have to continue with this teacher shortage, and hopefully we're getting there rather quickly.
Well, thank you both for being here, Delegate Barry Knight and Delegate Glenn Davis. Good to see you.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.